I've got the paper and finger scenario. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have to start really promptly because we've got quite a lot to get through. So welcome, just as the last few people are sitting down. It's fantastic to be here with you all in person, which is quite a unique, both a wonderful and slightly strange experience for us all, either if you're presenting up here or if you're down there in the audience. My name's Amy. I am the Community Manager from Bristol Green Capital Partnership, and I am going to be chairing this session today. So this is part of the Festival of the Future City, and the event is being hosted by Bristol Green Capital Partnership and the Community Climate Action Project. And I just have to flag that, unfortunately, due to COVID, the evil COVID fairy raising its head, that two of our speakers who had hoped to be here are not able to. So we will be giving their presentations for them, but that is COVID times. There's nothing we can do about that. So hopefully we will do them justice and represent them well. So this event today is part of a double bill this afternoon, which is focusing on a just transition. So some of you may also have tickets for the session running after this with the Black and Green ambassadors. So we are going to be exploring this afternoon together how communities can lead climate action. So we all know, I think, probably, that Bristol has got very bold and ambitious targets for becoming carbon zero by 2030. In order to achieve that, that's going to require everyone. So us all as individuals doing stuff, businesses, those that govern our city, and communities as well. And that's demographic communities and geographic communities across the city. And it's really only with that collective, citywide approach that we're going to be able to reach the target that we hope to reach in the city. So you may ask, why community-led climate action? Well, I got the opportunity of sharing with you probably one of my all-time favourite quotes, which I'm very pleased about, by Margaret Mead. And it just reminds us of the power of communities and the impact that we can have when we come together as communities to make important change happen. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the Community Climate Action Project in Bristol before we segue nicely onto hearing from our wonderful lineup of community partners. I'm going to try and keep it quite brief, and we'll be able to give you more information afterwards. But in essence, this project has got some core principles. So first of all, obviously, action on climate. And importantly, I think that's about understanding the fact that communities are part of that really essential jigsaw with all of the other actors in the city to make ambitious and just climate action happen. Secondly, action on inequality. So we know that not only do we want to aspire to reach net zero, but that transition to that needs to be just and fair. And it also needs to improve the quality of life of residents in the city, their life chances and their well-being, especially after the trauma of the pandemic. So that's a really important part of our project, that it's doing those two things. It's delivering on carbon impact, but on that community and social value impact as well. Another underlying sort of key part of our ethos is the principle of co-production in the way we work together. So all of the community plans that are being developed by our 6 partners are using a co-production methodology. So the plans and the priorities in the plans are being co-developed with members of the community. So it's very much grassroots up approach. And so we hope by doing that, that those priorities identified are authentic and that the communities will feel a sense of ownership over them. And lastly, community leadership, really, really important part of our project. and to show how the leadership that community organisations, community anchor organisations are playing in the city. We saw with the COVID response how community organisations really stepped up to the plate. They filled the gap often when other organisations or structures couldn't. They are experts of their own place and of their own lived experience. So in terms of leadership, we really do need that insight and that leadership within the citywide response to climate action. So just a little bit more detail about the project that has been running for a year now, and we're just moving towards the point where the plans are almost ready to launch. So there are 6 very diverse community partners taking part that hopefully represent the broad and complex diversity of our city, and hopefully including some of those voices that have had less voice, less agency within the climate conversations so far. So there has been a period of the last 6 months when the community partners have been doing some very rapid community engagement, talking to their communities, starting those climate conversations and trying to identify priorities. And as I said earlier, those priorities are very much delivering on carbon reduction and challenges, but also community co-benefits as well, doing those 2 things in parallel, delivering on social value. So by the end of the year, we should have 6 quite complex and broad-ranging community climate action plans that have been developed by the communities upwards. We hope to launch those in January. We'll have a launch event for that, so we hope to see many of you back at that. And we've also had the pleasure of working with 2 creatives as part of the project, who you'll hear from later on today. And that's with the idea of trying to find different ways, different creative ways to engage the broadest range of people possible in the climate conversation in the city. So I'm just going to end on going back to this idea of a just transition and the idea of co-benefits, which is something that's really, really central, I suppose, to our project. And we know that COVID exposed and compounded many existing inequalities. The idea that the pandemic was a great leveller was bandied about quite a lot. But in actual fact, as the author Damien Barr put it, we aren't all in the same boat. We're in the same storm. Some are on super yachts and some only have one oar. And I think it's important to recognise that we have a fantastic opportunity right now when we're responding to the climate crisis, the climate emergency, to also challenge some of the structural and systemic inequality and inequity that we face in our city and in our country, to improve the lives of people. And that's a very laudable aim, and surely that's what the levelling up agenda is all supposed to be about, isn't it? So we will shortly be hearing from a lineup of all the wonderful community partners and artists that have been working on the project. The format is, and it's going to be a bit of a gallop, so get ready. We're sort of a 5-minute Petra Kuchar style, 5 slides, 5 minutes per partner, and then we'll have some time for a panel discussion and Q&A at the end. So if I can ask you in the audience to hold your questions, if you've got them for individual partners, for the Q&A at the end, because we're going to be really, really tight on time. I would also like to just say a couple of words of thanks, really, to the Lotteries Community Climate Action Fund, who have supported this project here in Bristol, and also to 2 of our other core partners, essential on the project, the Centre for Sustainable Energy and Bristol City Council. And we've got Harriet from the Centre for Sustainable Energy and Mark and Nicola from Bristol City Council here with us today. If you are interested in finding out more detail about the project, you can go to the Bristol Green Capital website, and only of last week we have developed a new community section on the Bristol Climate Hub website, so you can also check that out, and we will be developing and adding content to that collectively over the next few months. Now, at this point, we were hoping that you would be able to hear from community artist Dee Moxon, who is one of the two creatives that we've commissioned to work on the project. Sadly, poor Dee is ill in bed with COVID, so I'm going to have to segue onto myself, who I'm going to try my best to represent the essence of Dee in the room and her contribution to the project. So, as I said, we thought it was a really good idea to try and work with some creatives in the city to try and see how some of those climate conversations could be instigated, catalysed in some different and engaging ways, trying to make it as accessible as possible. And Dee, many of you might know her because she is a community artist. She has been working across communities in the city for over 25 years. She mainly focuses, you may have seen her work, on lantern festivals and lantern parades. That's her art form. You may have experienced some of their beauty over the years in different parts of the city. She's a really strong personal interest in climate and a real passion for craft. And that is, she brought those two things together in this commission. So the focus of her part of the project was looking at climate craftivism. And I think it's important to say that climate isn't necessarily, for a whole host of reasons, a priority for everyone. And so it's really important that in trying to start and instigate conversations around climate action, we take different routes. We tap into different people's interests, and we don't sort of bombard people with facts or the doom and gloom, that we have a broad approach in the way we do that. And the craftivism, I suppose, fits into that category. So what is craftivism, you may ask? It is the practice of engaged creativity to highlight political or social issues. It is a gentle act of protest, and the idea behind it is that you create a beautiful, handmade and personal gift for a decision maker to highlight an issue and gently ask for constructive action to help make the world a better place. So Dee decided that she was going to make climate craftivism the focus of her creative commission. And she worked with the community partners in the project to create, both online and through in-person community workshops, a series of climate craftivism workshops that responded to themes that have been emerging through the communities from the public engagement that had been going on. So first up, and we can see here, this is in response to Clean Air Day, which was something a couple of the partners were really keen to start conversations with their community about. And so Dee came up with this idea of creating botanical sun catchers that were made from weeds. And Dee's intention with all of her craftivism was to make super low carbon gifts from either waste or from found objects, so that they were things that anybody could access. They weren't exclusive, so hence the weeds that she went out foraging for in East Bristol. Her second craftivism intervention was inspired by some growing projects in Lawrence Weston, and this was to make a high-rise planter for food or herbs out of an old pair of jeans. And it was, I suppose, thinking about the idea that even growing your own food can be a gentle sort of act of activism, even if you've got just a balcony. And Dee feels really strongly that craftivism should be a fun and a kind way of approaching climate action. And her latest foray into the world of craftivism is thinking about cloud craftivism. So using waste paper to highlight the carbon impact of our digital lives and the storage that goes behind our digital lives, which Dee tells me actually rivals the same carbon impact as aviation. But we never talk about it. We have our smartphones in our back pocket, you know, they're the door to our lives, and we have our whole lives stored on them, and yet we very rarely stop to think about the impacts that is having on the climate. And then finally, her final intervention, which is yet to happen, is working with Kirsty in the heart of BS13, sort of responding to the themes of growing, rewilding, food and fun. And she's going to be creating seed paper snails. which will be shared at a Lantern Parade event that she's going to be doing out in Hartcliffe on Bonfire Night. And this is reviving a lantern parade tradition that died out, I think, about 20 years ago in Hartcliffe. So it's wonderful to bring it back. And I suppose the idea behind that is creating a kind of positive energy community event that is a real stimulus for people to engage in a fun way with climate and climate action, but that, quite frankly, also lifts people's spirits at the end of a challenging couple of years. And I should say at this point that Dee very industriously yesterday was making about 70-odd seed paper snails for you all to take home as a little Craftivism gift. But because she's got COVID, they could be contaminated. So I'm really sorry that you haven't got one of those, but you have got the opportunity to find out how to make one yourself. So as part of the project, Dee has sort of curated and put together a really great series of short YouTube tutorials that are very simple, very visual, so that anyone can go and replicate any of the Craftivism events that she's done as part of this project. They're a really great sort of opener in terms of thinking about climate conversations. It could be a youth group, an arts event, a school group, a book group, you know, whatever. A brilliant way of starting a climate conversation. So if you've got your phone out, then there is that QR code will take you to her blog that's got links to all those films, but also a lot more of the backstory to why she chose Craftivism and some of her thoughts behind it. So I'll just give you a minute to photograph that if you need to. And she asked me to say she's very sorry that she can't be here today, but there is an email address on the blog at which she responds to. So if anyone has got any questions or would like to connect with her in some way, then please do get in touch. So I think she's listening in on the live stream, so I hope I've done that justice, Dee. And sorry, and we hope you're feeling better soon. So, I'm now going to hand over to our veritable smorgasbord of presentations from our 6 wonderful community climate action partners. So this is going to be quite rapid. And I'm going to hand over first to Donna from Ambition Lawrence Weston.
Thanks, Amy. Eyes on. Yeah, 5 minutes is going to be really brief, but we are doing a Q&A afterwards. So this is just some of the branding that we had made up for the project. So for people who don't know, Lawrence Weston, where is it? It's north of the city. So we're in a ward with Sharhampton, Seamills and Avonmouth. And we have roughly 7,300 people living in Lawrence Weston in around 3,200 homes. We have 4 lower super output areas and 2 are in the top 10% of deprivation. We have a lower life expectancy than the average in the city. 40% of our children are living in low-income families. 23% of adults are living with a disability or a life-limiting illness. 40% of our residents have no access to a van or car within their home, and 36% of adults have no formal qualifications. So that's just highlighting some of the health inequalities that we're facing in Lawrence Weston, but it's not all doom and gloom. So this is just a lovely photo of our brand new, or the latest edition of our community plan. So this was written in 2018. And I just really wanted to highlight that we're a kind of a grassroots organisation, resident-led, working on priorities for our community. And we kind of encompass everything from children and young people, housing, transport, and it really is kind of the real focus that residents are in the driving seat when it comes to change within the community. We're never going to be able to do it individually, but we need to do it collectively. And it's really important that we know as a community organisation what matters, so what's important, what are people's concerns and their issues. And we do this, so we've got a neighbourhood development plan and a community plan. And we're really excited, actually, to be developing a climate action plan now. But we need to remain responsive and flexible. So this is a lovely picture of our Men in Sheds project. So this was set up probably about 2 years ago now, just kind of post-COVID, really. And climate is not something that we've necessarily been focusing on in Lawrence Weston. It's not something that, you know, we're singing and dancing about and we're kind of advocating in any kind of way. And if you speak to myself or colleagues, we always say we're doing climate by stealth. So what we're kind of focusing on is the co-benefit. So how are we improving overall residents' health and well-being? And yeah, this is Jim, George and Nobby. So it's really important for us that we put residents in the driving seat, that they're really driving any kind of community work that you're doing. And is their interests and passions, that is the hook to get them involved in something bigger, and climate certainly is that something bigger. So for us is the co-benefit is what we're focusing on. So like public transport, housing, access to jobs and skills is like the main priority, and climate is like what we're calling the incidental outcome. So it's like the secondary outcome, because everything that you're doing, or the work that you're doing, even if you've never thought about it, will have some impact on climate change and carbon reductions. So for us, it's the incidental outcome that we're kind of focusing on. And it's just really what we're there for is in our strapline is basically around improving the health and well-being for everyone living in Lawrence Weston and addressing social injustices. So natural progression. So yeah, Ambition Lawrence Weston was formed back in 2012 when a group of residents came together because of austerity measures, loss of facilities, services declining, and we lost the straw that broke the camel's back. Really was the loss of the city of Bristol College, which had the local library service, the after school club, the drama workshops, plus it was just this huge community asset, and it was that loss that kind of brought residents together, and we're like, we really have to do something. And it's basically, if there's one key message, I can see my 1 minute thing, thanks Amy, is have aspirations, aim high, bring residents on your journey, make residents part of the solution. They're not part of the problem. They have to be part of the solution. Work together, expand on your projects, and you will gain momentum. So now, for example, Ambition Lawrence Weston, we've just got planning permission to build the biggest onshore wind turbine in the UK. You know, 2012, we're just a group of ruffians hanging around street corners wanting to, you know, we have to do something about this. And it is that progression, and you will, by all of those things, you know, gaining momentum and getting residents involved, putting them in the driving seat, that will get you on that journey. And I hope that was within my 5 minutes.
Great, thank you very much, Donna. Certainly not a ruffian. So unfortunately, Emma Geen from Bristol Disability Equalities Forum also has someone with COVID in her household and can't be with us today. You hopefully got a chance to see a snippet of the fantastic film that she made as you were coming into the event. But Harriet Sansom from CSE, who's a core part of the project, has very kindly, at the last minute, stepped in to speak to Emma's slide. So thank you so much, Harriet, and sorry you can't be with us, Emma.
Hi, everyone. So, one of the few climate success stories of our government that our government boasts is of the plastic straw ban. Straws make up 4% of the plastic waste that goes into the oceans by piece. So this was a clear success, right? Note the by piece. 9 million tonnes of plastic enter the ocean each year. 2,000 tonnes of this is straws. So by weight, the ban reduced ocean plastic waste by a whopping 0.022%. And as the seas continue to choke in plastic, the disabled people who rely on plastic straws not to choke are left high and dry. A little known fact is that plastic bendy straws were used by disabled people before they became mainstream. For some, these straws are essential for stopping liquid aspirating in the lungs, and other materials just don't work the same way. For these people, the ban is yet another burden. I'm starting with this story as an example of how poorly designed climate action does little to stop the crisis, but makes yet more barriers for disabled people. And it's why environmental action that is designed without including disabled people is the last straw for many. Disabled people are among those most impacted by climate change, yet we are among the least responsible. The carbon footprint of Bristol's disabled community is lower than the Bristol average, despite extra energy needs within the community for aids, mobility vehicles and heating homes. This is likely because many polluting activities are those that disabled people are excluded from due to inaccessibility or income. 50% of households in poverty include one or more disabled people, and almost half of disabled people in Bristol report an inadequate or worse quality of life. So while we have a lot to lose from poorly designed climate action, we have a lot to gain if it is used as an opportunity to tackle inequalities. The needs of the disabled people vary hugely depending on their impairment, so we wanted to hear from as many disabled people as possible. We ran a project survey and promoted it with a video, adverts and flyering homes. We took a sofa to shopping malls across the city and invited disabled people to sit and talk over tea. As there is currently little work on climate action and disability, many people said it was hard to think of ideas. So we also ran sharing sessions that brought together disabled people with subject experts to explore solutions. Clear priorities emerged. We will be encouraging the councils and other stakeholders to make these happen. First, many disabled people will never be able to use public transport or walk. We must not limit their lives by preventing them from driving. Second, pavements need to be improved if we want disabled people to drive less. They are bumpy and used by parked cars, e-scooters and bikes. Third, public transport needs to be more accessible. There isn't enough wheelchair space, more routes are needed, and staff need to be more disability friendly. 4, changes to food provision must accommodate medical dietary needs. 5th, green spaces must be accessible. The One City Climate Strategy aims for everyone to live within 10 minutes walk of a green space, but many disabled people can't access those that already exist. Lastly, but not least, disabled people must be included in the development of the city's plans, not brought in as an afterthought. We will also launch our own projects to allow the community to drive change without having to wait for action from above. We hope to hire disabled transport and energy champions who will run events, educate, and enable access to grants. We also want to create a repair cafe for mobility equipment, a library of things, accessible allotments, cookery lessons, accessibility audits on green spaces, and campaigns around our priorities. I want to finish, though, by acknowledging that after years of our needs not being accommodated, many disabled people have little trust in those in power. A frequent comment we received whilst we were doing our research was, "You are dreamers." I have empathy for this cynicism, but is being a dreamer a bad thing? To dream is to look at what is and realise what could be. The current what is unsustainable, both for disabled people and our planet. And if we want a future that we can thrive in, we must dream, and furiously. So to stakeholders in the city, I say, prove our doubts wrong. Show us our priorities are yours. We need and welcome allies. To disabled people, a better Bristol is possible, but we will need your help to make it real, so please be part of the change. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Harriet and Emma, wherever you are. That was really inspiring. My name is Emily. I'm the Community Project Manager at Eastside Community Trust, and my colleague Abir will be joining us as well for the Q&A session after. So Eastside Community Trust is based in the East Central Bristol wards of Easton and Lawrence Hill. These are, among other things, two of the youngest and most ethnically diverse wards in the city, with large Somali, South Asian, and Afro-Caribbean populations. However, while we have a very diverse range of backgrounds, perspectives, and ages represented within our community, that is not necessarily the case in conversations and decision-making around climate action. So when we started this project, we saw it as an opportunity to start opening up that conversation, bringing in new voices, and starting to move beyond some of the divisions that we've experienced as a community from past actions in finding common purpose. So today I'll be sharing a few of the learnings that we've had as told to us by residents about what was important in starting to make that shift. So from the start, it's really important how we invite people into the conversation. We were most successful when we made personal invitations to people, drawing on our own networks and relationships within the community and speaking about things that were already of interest to people. It was also about not just doing a general invitation, but also going to people where they were, both physically and in terms of what people's interests are, where people feel familiar and comfortable, rather than just welcoming them always into your own space. So this quote is actually from a mom who came to one of our first events, which we held at Rawnsley Park, where Beer knew a lot of families, and it started relationships with a lot of people who had not been involved previously in the conversation, who then went on to join other events or on other topics of interest, and who are now actually looking at starting a community garden in that space. So another thing that we heard from residents was the importance of creating real space for them to talk about what was important to them and feel genuinely listened to. Rather than coming in with a set agenda and what we think is important and what we think people need to be doing. When we started by asking, what is important to you? And taking the things that people said mattered to them and finding links between that and climate action, we had very different conversations that were much more productive and also much more interesting. Most of the people that we spoke with said that they were not speaking to other people about climate, but that did not mean in any way they were not interested in having those conversations and learning more about the topic. So East and Lawrence Hill are often spoken about in terms of deprivation. What's wrong, what's lacking, what's the problem, and this is often also the case around climate action. So rather than starting conversations by talking about what people should be doing and weren't doing, we went in and just had more broad conversations, asking people about their daily activities, cultural practices, traditions, and then together finding links between those actions and the response to climate emergency. Some of these were just household things like mending your clothes and growing food in your community and sharing extra food with neighbors. But some of it was also traditions and beliefs that were deeply held that can be really important and drawing on to broaden out the movement. For example, a leader at Easton Jamia Mosque on St. Mark's Road began looking for links between Islam and climate change and soon found loads of teachings that can be used as a direct call to action. The mosque then took and created a booklet called A Muslim's Guide to Climate Change, and they've taken a very active role now in the movement. So when we recognize and celebrate what's already here and good in our communities, it allows more people to feel like a part of the solution, and it also provides a shift in momentum. If we feel like we're on our own trying to take on the climate catastrophe, most of us are not going to last very long or be very effective. I think a lot of people right now are very stretched with limited time and resources, and it's really critical that we make sure that the movement feels relevant to people and also like something that is achievable for us to be able to contribute our time and effort to it. It's not just saying, don't worry, everything is going to be okay, but it's saying, this is a massive, urgent challenge, and we're all in it together. You're not alone, and together we can make real positive change. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Tom from ACH, so I'm the research and project lead. ACH are a refugee integration organisation. Our head office is in Bristol and we also have offices across the West Midlands. So in terms of this short presentation, I thought I'd give kind of 5 key areas for thought to spark interest in you guys. So first of all, we're talking about the context. So for us in the UK, the context of climate change can often feel quite abstract. It can feel like something that's in the future, it can feel like something that isn't necessarily impacting us in our daily lives. This is different for our service users, for our refugees in the city. Many of them who've fled their home countries, the cause of some of those conflicts can be traced back to climate change. And not only that, many of them will have friends, family in those countries who are being impacted right now by famine, by drought, by the various symptoms of climate change. So communication. So we communicated with our refugee communities. We have to listen actively to both to their concerns and also to their ideas about what it is that they can do within those communities to start to combat climate change. This is obviously an act of collaboration, so we need to work with those communities, not on their behalf. So we need to bring in the lived experience of those refugee communities and all diverse communities and treat them as equals, not as people to be included as an afterthought as part of the process. So this takes the form of championing. So rather than us championing on their behalf, we recruit and we work directly with people from those communities who do the championing for the communities they're part of. They are the experts, we are not the experts. They know the impact that climate change is having on their community. They know the impact that climate change is having on their friends and families back home. So they are the best people to speak for themselves. And just as a final thought, I think climate change or combating climate change will inevitably involve compromise. It will involve compromise in our lives, it will involve compromise in some of the things we do now, and some of the things we might have to give up. But I think what's important is who are we asking to compromise? Are we asking people, so we completed a carbon footprint survey. Our residents, the refugees in Bristol, have some of the smallest carbon footprints of anyone. So are we asking them to give up more, or should we be giving up things so that they don't have to? Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Karen Edkins and I live and work in Lockleys for Lockleys Neighbourhood Trust. I'm one of their engagement workers. We have over 12,000 people living in with Lockleys and we're a highly deprivated area. We are there as a community centre to empower the residents to make changes for themselves in the aspects that they want to change. I'm picking one aspect of our community climate action that we've been working on, and that is food, because food in our area, good, fresh, affordable food is so hard to come by, and so many families live in food poverty. The Venture, our much-loved adventure playground, addressed this by opening a weekly food club, working with Fair Share. We get food from the various supermarkets in the area that would have been waste, and we divert between 500 and 800 kilograms of food each week from landfill. Anyone can join the group. You have to work or live in Lockleys, and each week you get fresh food, dry food, options of meat and vegan. The Venture is a Going for Gold champion since 2019. And food is a big part of their work because of the deprivation in the area. So many children suffer from food poverty, and I hear stories of children literally taking the school meals home to feed their families. So in the holidays we do I hate the name of it, but a holiday hunger club. We shouldn't be in the 5th richest country and have a holiday hunger club. But the kids love making their own food as well. This is like a passion of theirs, and learning about food and its health benefits. And we wanted to see if that would be as popular with adults and families. So we had a local resident that came to us with a passion for pizza. In lockdown, he'd really perfected his bases and his toppings, and he was a vegan as well. So we thought, this is a good chance for people to try ingredients. You know, you're quite daunted when you see something in the supermarket. You think, oh my God, look at the price of that. So this was our chance for people to try toppings that they probably wouldn't normally try. So we marinated some jackfruit, which is a great alternative to pulled pork. And yeah, the surprise faces when they were tucking into this pizza was like, wow, yeah, it tastes good, doesn't it? So yeah, people got to then take the marinated jackfruit that we had at the end to try in chilies and curries. And yeah, we've had some great feedback from people saying it tasted really good in a curry too. So in the workshops, we managed to talk to people about reducing food waste and how it also
reduces by bulk cooking, saves them money and reduces packaging. And also the impact of the climate has with the meat and dairy industry, and how by just cutting down, doing a meat-free Monday as a family can really help. So yeah, another aspect of food was we've got 5 amazing local farms in our area. So we hooked up with Life Cycle and took some residents with lots of pedal power to see these 5 very different farms, to show residents there is an alternative to the big supermarkets with their food packaging and air miles. We were greeted by fields and fields of pick your own fruit and veg, which everybody loved, wandering around and seeing them, and also, you know, while you're picking, have a munch on them as well, which everyone was fine with us doing, testing them out. And they run a system where you can pay what you feel, and they also talk to us about their veggie box schemes. So yeah, both of these events were like hugely popular and oversubscribed, and we are still getting inquiries to when our next cycle ride is and when our next cooking lesson is. Residents do want alternatives to the supermarkets, to the air miles, to the packaging. They do want to eat locally grown vegetable and things they've cooked themselves from locally grown vegetables. So yeah, thank you for your time, everyone.
So, hi, I'm Kirsty Hammond. I'm the Climate Action Development Practitioner for Heart of BS13. Some of you may have been on the earlier meeting where I talked about energy. So, Hartcliffe, where is it? Where's BS13? We're south of the city. BS13 community, there's 22,000 people that live in this area, yet often residents say they feel like it's a dumping ground. It's a forgotten part of the city where their opinion, their voice doesn't really get carried across the city and inputted into some of the changes that happen across Bristol. BS13 is in the top, we have a resident area, Hareclive Road, which is in the top 1% of deprivation, and BS13 overall is in the top 10% of multiple indices of deprivation. Big word, what does that mean? It means that there are lots and lots of barriers that people face who live in that community. And the climate change, what we're hearing is people can't, they can't afford to be green. This is one of the things that people are coming back and saying to us. The climate crisis shouldn't be a burden on individuals, especially those from communities like BS13 that already have barriers and inequality. So I've got a little slide to show you. This one should play. So we have been delivering a creative climate education series of workshops. We've worked with over 1,000 young people on this project. We took the approach that young people need to be at the front and centre of this work, that it's their voice that needs to be heard. We know that 65% of future jobs for young people don't exist yet. So we felt that it was really important that we worked within schools, asking them the questions, hearing from them, and taking their points of view and adding that into our climate action plan. Ask yourself how many young people you speak to across the city that you say to them, what do you want to be when you're older? Do they say things like a climatologist or, a solar engineer or a clean air engineer? It's something that we need to be instilling in our education and bringing to places and investing in places like BS13. Sorry. There we are. So why should community organisations be the best people and the best places to offer this kind of community-led approach? And mainly it's because we're trusted within our communities. We have a direct link in with other organisations such as GPs. We have a network And we're also able to empower local people and listen to them and really connect with local people. One of the quotes that I'm going to read out to you is, since coming to volunteer at the gardens, my confidence has grown and I'm learning loads. I'm really enjoying it and it's getting me out of the house. I'm learning about climate change, which I didn't have a clue about before. And this is from Denise, who's one of our volunteers at the allotment site. And just seeing the growth in that person, and then within the schools and the lovely quotes and poems and expressive way that we are coming up with ideas and changes that they can implement, has been an amazing process. So what more needs to be done? We know that as a community we cannot just tackle this alone, and Bristol, we're really lucky that we're in this position to be, having all of these great partners and offering this community climate action plan. But systemic change, behaviour change, through education and training, through transport, through green economy jobs, opportunities that are embedded in places like BS13, and investment in renewable energy is really the way forward. And thank you ever so much for listening.
Oh, hang on. We need to hear that. Thank you so much. And I have to say, for me, it's a real privilege to be able to work with such fantastic organisations doing such amazing and impactful work across the city. I'm so proud of you all for being here today. I know that you were nervous about being in this public arena and talking, and you've done brilliantly. Thank you. So next up, I'd like to invite Morgan, who is the other creative working on, and Tommy, sorry, both of you coming together, the other duo of creatives that have been working on the programme, trying to find other creative ways of engaging a very broad range of people with that climate conversation in the city. So over to you two.
Sorry, it took a bit less time to traverse over. I was sort of hanging in there. I'm Morgan. I'm not actually this much taller than Tommy.
Sorry.
This is Tommy.
Let's go to the mic.
So I'm a socially engaged artist. My work is typified more by very deep engagement in communities. I don't make a distinction between my artistic practice and working as a carer, as a support worker, within education. And within my work, I work typically for long periods of time and seek much more than symbolic change, so agitate for real action and legacy beyond the creative work. So really, I'm kind of catalyst.
And I'm Tommy. I work with film and video and animation and sound. Collaborate with Morgan quite a lot on the projects that she does. And it's a lot of the work's about we never really that sure until we start actually doing it. It sort of ends up sort of happening as we go. It's
not really engagement if you've already decided what the output is. And I guess the points where our practice intersects is a kind of visual activism. What do I do? There we go. So quite a challenge because as was alluded to earlier, the community partners aren't necessarily all physical locations, geographical locations, also involving very diverse demographics. So in trying to think about something that kind of unified the engagement process, but also very intrinsically examined and explored the context, because that's really what socially engaged art practice does. There's no context that's neutral. The people are part of the process, the people are the material and the tool and the medium, as is the context and the situation in which it has informed their experiences. So the overarching idea was to hold a series of alternative COPs, also in acknowledgement of the fact that, as Kirsty was saying earlier, a lot of the kind of massive totemic themes about climate change are very burdensome. So how do we demystify tectonic decisions that are made? How do we explore that in tangible, digestible ways that are actually empowering and seed future activism? So we held a series of COPs in the different community settings that also encompass something about the context. So for example, the United Animals Assembly was held at Felix Road Adventure Playground. and that sort of came off the back of doing some research at Felix Road and encountering this amazing, very progressive space where children are very tangibly part of the decision-making process of that site, and very have a kind of innate sensitivity towards animals. So researching animals that are locally under threat, and thinking about following the UN structure of having a General Assembly, coming up with some different questions that we had, some potential solutions, and then arriving at a resolution within each site. Also in the bottom right-hand corner, that's an organisation that we work with through Heart of BS13, so we work with A2A. And in speaking to young people there before the workshop, I found out that a lot of people wanted to go on to kind of do beauty and work as beauticians. So we looked into making our own, researching the kind of the harmful chemicals that are already in beauty products, as well as the kind of microplastics, and thinking about very affordable, easily replicable ways of making our own beauty products. So each workshop, in a sense, I could go on about them all, but you get the sense that there was an overall structure where you're exploring through the mechanisms of how the UN actually works, through dialogue, through debate, through brainstorming, through a resolution, and also some practical, very tangible, fun, workshop-style activities that also unlock all sorts of other ways of learning, haptic and heuristic ways of learning. The community groups came up with their different resolutions. And yeah, it informed a series of digital works. Do you want me to play it before you?
Yeah, I mean, the digital works themselves, we call them memes, they're really short. And I think in a way, we barely scratched the surface. We had the privilege working with these different groups. We really barely scratched the surface with the work that they do. So the response is a very small response to it, but that response is also, those limitations were quite enjoyable to work with. And we really enjoyed working with the different groups and made these really short animations.
It's a start of a conversation, right?
Yeah, that's basically what it was.
Is it going to play?
I think it was a score. I think it is. No, I don't think it is.
It's worrying me that it says 60 minutes.
I don't know if it's playing.
Oh.
No. Oh, it is.
Thank you very much, Morgan and Tommy. And those memes will be finding their way to a COP-related social media campaign coming soon. Great way of showing how you can engage diverse communities with the climate conversation and develop some creative outcomes. So that's the end of our gallop through of our 8 different presentations, I think. So I would now like to invite our community partners to come up and take a seat at the panel. And I think, Abir, you're going up on behalf of Eastside Community Trust, but Emily is going to be here as well. And Morgan and Tommy, although they're not up on the panel, they are here and they're open for questions. So a couple of practical things. We should have somewhere a roving mic, which I think is just coming. So if you have got a question that you would like to ask, please can you wait for the roving mic to come to you before asking your question or speaking. Could we please make the polite request that you do actually ask a question rather than just put across a statement, if that's okay? If your question is directed to a specific individual member of the panel, then please can you state that. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can. We've got just under 15 minutes for this part of the session, so fingers crossed we can cover quite a lot. So yeah, we've heard from our community partners some of their insights, some of their methodologies about how they've gone about igniting those climate conversations in their communities, and we're hoping that from the project there'll be a lot of learning that can be shared, that we can, share further beyond today with other communities across the city and beyond to help support and inspire them in their own climate action journeys. So it is now over to you. So I'm going to put it over to the audience and say, has anyone got any questions that they would like to ask? And we've got the roving mic. Brilliant. So gentlemen right over there in the corner. And if you'd like to introduce yourselves when you've got the mic, just very briefly, just say your name and where you're from. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Mark Gale, I'm a farmer from Western-super-Mare. I've been co-owner of a wind farm for 20 odd years, community owned, and I'm curious as to when the Lawrence Western turbine is likely to be built and what funding scheme that we can participate in is likely to happen.
Yeah, so is this working?
Yeah, you might pull it a bit closer.
To be perfectly honest with you, it is not my project. I believe the turbine is coming in November, and it will be installed and operational, I believe, by March. That may not quite be accurate. And I do believe there is a share offer and it will be coming out, but I can't say any more than that, I'm sorry.
But I know that Donna and her colleague Mark are very open to visitors, so definitely, when that is, then do come down and visit them.
Yeah, I believe there's a share offer and it will be going out, and yeah, the wind turbine is coming over, is being delivered in November. So however long it takes to put it in the ground, I suppose.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, gentleman there.
Hi, my name's Mike Thomas. I work for Transition Network, which supports over 300 community organisations in the UK to do similar activity to yourselves. And yeah, I loved hearing about all the projects. I think they're great. And one of the things that we hear a lot from groups on the ground is the challenges that they face are one is like just the capacity of groups to respond. So it feels to me that there's, I'd like to know how you feel that you could be given more capacity in order to have more of an impact. And the other thing that we hear a lot about is livelihoods, is like that people would like to transform, particularly in areas where there's more deprivation, that is how you can create, livelihoods for groups, for individuals within the community to take that work on and actually get paid for it. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on those two things. I suppose it's like what power do you actually have within your community, and how could that be increased to have more of an impact?
Thank you. So it's a big question, and I think I'm just going to jump in and say one thing in terms of speaking to that capacity issue, because you're right, community organisations are very limited in time, capacity and staff time, and very overstretched. And it's just to acknowledge that we wouldn't have been able to do this project here in Bristol if we hadn't have had that specific support from the Lotteries Climate Action Fund, which has freed up some time, some headspace for us to collaborate. So that's just a really important part. And that fund is continuing, I think, for another 10 years. So just to flag that. But in terms of individual responses, should we start at the end with Kirsty?
So obviously capacity, it depends very much on funding. And, we can produce and communicate more with the projects and, to see what we've done and what we've achieved within a short space of time during COVID has been amazing. So obviously if there was more funding, then we have a larger capacity. So yeah, that's probably my point on that one. And then as a community, like you've said about wanting to, get out of deprivation, that really comes down to investment from the green economy and like business sectors thinking oh, you know, I'm not going to put a new tram system in North Bristol. I'm going to come and do that in BS13. So it's really about recognising that we as our communities do need to be included in that, and that's basically a way forward in improving the economy.
Is there anyone else who particularly like to come forward and respond to that question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about, I had this conversation just at lunchtime, the amount of time we spend filling forms in for funding, and I don't want a government bash, but I will government bash. We've got the work, we know what needs to be done within our communities know what needs to be done, but we're forever fighting for funding. So that was why it's wonderful to get this funding from the lottery, but we shouldn't be having to fight for this funding, not being the 5th richest country in the world. We should be able to solve our problems within our communities and within Bristol.
Would anyone else, thanks Karen, from the panel like to make any comments? I don't know, Tom, in terms of the green economy and jobs and that angle, if there's something you'd like to share, because I know you particularly focused on training and thinking about the potential for jobs.
Yeah, I did have something to say, I think, in terms of the livelihoods point that you made. I think all of these organisations, ourselves included, we work with communities that are sometimes classed as hard to reach, right? It's like, you know, how do you reach these communities? The easiest way for any organisation to reach those communities is to recruit people from those communities. Work directly with people from the communities you're trying to reach, not as volunteers, not as community champions, but as paid members of staff. And those people with lived experience will get you into those communities. So I think in terms of green sector jobs and other kind of existing green organisations and the jobs of the future, it's important that those jobs are diverse in the makeup of people that are doing them and are actively trying to recruit people from all of the communities of a city like Bristol, not just kind of the same kind of middle-class graduate backgrounds that they tend to be filled by now.
Thanks, Tom. I don't know, Abir, is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on to the next question?
A lot of the residents we work with, they're really interested and engaged in the projects we do, but it's just that how can we involve them more? How can they have more ownership for themselves and take more control for themselves? That's what we're trying to work on.
And it is, I think, a particular challenge because in a lot of communities, people are financially poor, but also time poor, and have got a lot of other demands on their time, which is why it's so important that community hub organisations are kind of there, listening, amplifying their needs and wants. Thank you all. Do we have any other questions? I'm being quite shy. Any? Yes, thank you. Lady over here.
Hi there, my name's Anna. I'm also a social engagement artist and I work with communities across the city. Following on from the previous points, I wonder if there is anything that we can do to change the financial systems in this city, because it is actually also a very wealthy city, and I know that local governments are suffering a lot because national government's making wrong decisions or potentially wrong decisions on climate. But I'm just wondering, I hear a lot about the inequalities across the city through the people that I work with, and I'm wondering whether anybody has any ideas of how we can tap into the existing wealth in the city to level things up. I hate using phrases that Boris Johnson uses, but So,
Thanks, Anna. So that's thinking about ideas of tapping in. It's, I suppose, that redistribution of wealth and how it can be supporting communities with a sort of dynamic both social value and climate action work that they're doing. I should at this point also invite both Harriet from CSE and Mark, you core parts of the project. If you want to respond on anything, then do put your hand up. There's no pressure, but you're very, very welcome. I wonder if Donna, was that you?
Well, I was just going to give an example of something that's happening. and I don't know whether you've heard of the cheese project. So this is the colder homes energy efficiency thing. So essentially is around thermal imaging your home, which it videos over a 24-hour period, and you can watch back at where heat is escaping from your home, and just, any improvements that your home would need to become warmer is shown up within this video. And it is ran, is a charity, and it's ran across Bristol, and what they have in place is a tariff for people who can afford it. So people, Clifton, Henleys, Westbury, these kind of areas pay a set fee, which includes a payment that means that deprived areas can get it for free. So they're paying a higher set amount so that they can deliver this free to areas of deprivation. So people, who we all represent will be able to access this for free, so then they can get a recording. And if you're living in social housing, and this actually happened to one of our tenants, they took that recording to Bristol City Council and said, look, and they did come round and repair and re-insulated all of her flats. So it is definitely worth something doing. So that's just an example of something that is already currently happening about redistributing a project by charging people who can afford it so that people who can't can still access it.
Thanks, Donna. And I wonder whether, Kirsty, I'm thinking about some of the work you've done around food and the Real Meal store, whether you'd like to sort of talk to, in the kind of, I suppose it's a slight Robin Hood-esque.
So I touched on the fact that our capacity is limited around funding, and as an organisation, we've taken the approach that we also need to have and generate our own income streams to be able to facilitate our free work, basically, for people that live in BS13. So we've set up a number of social enterprise schemes, such as the Real Meal store. Earlier I touched on the fact that over COVID and during the pandemic, we gave out 40,000 free meals as part of our food response service. That cannot just be something that relies on funding. So what we've developed is a pay it forward range. So we now sell healthy, fresh, frozen meals across Bristol that people can access through our website. And for every meal bought, that will then supply a family of 4 with on our food service. So that's just one of the social enterprise projects that we've developed that's come out of the pandemic that addresses food insecurity, but it's also a link then into being referred. If you have issues around fuel poverty, it could then mean that I've referred you to warm homes. It could be then you're looking at reducing your carbon footprint by having better insulation. So it's like a gatekeeper, it's a way in. So we know that climate change needs to be relevant to people who already have barriers, and so by accessing our service in through the food route, we've then been able to touch on climate change and how that can be, how we can fix some of that for local people. And then one of our other services is with our KGE, so our kitchen garden enterprise. We have an allotment site where we grow our own veg. We have like monthly veg subscription boxes. We also sell fresh cut flowers, which all of the revenue generated in from that then goes into running workshops with local people. It could be around soil health, it could be around educating people around floristry and flower miles, as well as helping to fund for our core team of volunteers, many of who have many challenges, whether it be mental health or they're neurodiverse. So this is how Heart of BS13 are trying to tackle inequality and become sustainable whilst then combating climate change.
Thanks, Kirsty. Is there anyone else on the panel who particularly wants to come back on that question? If not, there's probably time to just squeeze in one more quickie if anyone's got something burning. Iris at the back, got your hand up just ahead. So final quick question.
Hi, my name is Iris. I've been working on projects across the city for a very long time. I would like to ask the panelists, how they see the connection between the really good work that you're all doing, by the way, it's brilliant, with the what I would call a barrage of questions that's going to come from local, national government at our communities, and it's already coming. You know, what are you doing about your waste? What are you doing about your car charging points? What are you going to do about your street? How are you going to get an electric car? What transport do you want? And it's all these questions, and I think there's a tendency by government, in my opinion, to sort of divide and conquer. And how are you going to, as part of this, use the voices to address those bigger questions that are part of the climate action agenda, to make those voices heard when individuals and families are going to be asked questions that really, in my opinion, should be asked as communities or streets, or not on your own anyway. So that's my question.
Thanks very much, Iris, and a very good question it is too. And I think if I can, I'll just come back on it really quickly. I suppose part of the ambition around these co-produced community climate action plans that kind of pull together from the grassroots up what the communities want and need is that creates quite a robust and extensive document that the community organisations can use. It's a bit of a stick and a carrot. It's a door opener. We've had lots of conversations about what as community organisations we have the power and agency to do on our own, but a lot of the significant changes that need to happen, that requires enabling behaviours from other people in the city, whether that's in the local authority or in business. And so I think we hope, and obviously we're kind of piloting and testing this, that with those plans we can it's a door opener. We can, rather than having people come to individuals or the community organisations and say you've got to do this, it's like, actually we've spoken to our community, this is what our community wants and needs, these are our priorities, how are you going to work with us to make this a reality, for climate and for people. We've probably got, I shouldn't just say that, is there anybody who would like to particularly come back on that before we draw things to a close?
Well, I just wanted to address, we've been surveying people and asking about, why don't they use buses, and every time it comes back, the price, they're being unreliable, not well networked. We can't expect people to get out of their cars when we haven't got an alternative for them. I spoke to various elderly and ladies, and we had evening events, we had a clothes swap, and they turned up in their car and they came in and apologised. I'm sorry, I'll come in my car. And I said, don't worry, I'm on my bike, I'll knock whoever has come towards me over. But they did not feel safe standing at that bus stop, which shouldn't be like that. The Conservative government cut 20,000 police officers off the streets, didn't they? So yeah, we're writing these plans, and obviously we're thinking, what can we achieve? But it shouldn't be what can we as organisations can achieve. We're coming from the bottom up, but we need to be asking from the top as well. This is not just about us as individuals solving it, it's the top helping us to solve it.
I'd just like to add that within our climate action plans, our priorities, we have been ambitious, and actually, like Amy was saying, that isn't it. The onus on these plans isn't that we as individual organisations can make these changes. These are the suggestions that are needed. This is what the community has said are barriers, and this is what action needs to be taken.
And I think you need to make sure you're asking those questions to the right people. So for some of the refugee families that we work with, one of their biggest concerns was around clean air for themselves and for their children, particularly in Lawrence Hill, Barton Hill. Most of those families do not have cars, are too poor to have cars. So it's people commuting through their neighbourhood that's causing that dirty air, right? So the question shouldn't be put to them, what are you going to do to change about climate change? It should be put to others and say, look at the impact your actions are having on these less well-off families.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. That's a good point to end. Thank you all very much for those questions. I wish we had more time to delve into more detail. So we've just got last couple of minutes of the event, and really pleased that joining us today in the audience, we have got Councillor Nicola Beach, who is the Cabinet Member for Climate, Ecology and Waste. Correct me if I've got that wrong. And so Nicola has been here as a kind of active listener, kind of absorbing in a sponge-like way some of the things that she's been hearing from our partners, and we've just invited her, just very informally, to for 2 minutes just to reflect on what she's heard, and if there's anything that particularly resonates with her and the agenda that she's got for climate change and climate action in the city. So if I can ask you to come up here, Nicola. Thank you.
Wow, oh my gosh, I feel quite emotional, to be honest with you. So thank you very much. It's a massive privilege to be here and just hear you talking. So I grew up in Salford. I'm the first in my family to go to university. So hearing these voices is something that it passionately affects me. And taking this brief on in May, we have some amazing things in this city, but we have so much to do. It's actually quite overwhelming, as you can see. And so coming here and listening to these stories today, I represent Speedwell, so I saw myself that sec. I live in St George Central. I represent that ward. And we see exactly the same challenges, endless funding bids for community centre extensions that, actually was a depot to build the council houses in the first place, and we're turning it into a sports hall because of a deficit of indoor space for children. I see the food relationship. Our food club in Speedwell is just so terrifyingly popular, is what I would call it, to be honest with you, in this day and age. The Hungry Bellies in Hillfields that we managed to feed in 2019, I see it, and it's quite scary, is what I would say. However, oh my gosh, hearing you speak today, and you realise, and Amy and I are in a separate conversation about the work that's happened to date with our One City climate strategy and the position as a city we have reached, which is phenomenal. As a city, we understand our baseline, we know what a climate emergency means, and we know how much it will cost to decarbonise Bristol. We are streets ahead of any other city in this country in terms of that. But when you hear, we know the start line, but how we actually get to 2030 is a whole spectrum of success or failure. Does that make sense? And I have so many conversations with community groups outside of St George Central, active travel groups. I remember was one in St George set up by a very amazing one called Lindsay, but I text my street WhatsApp to say, anyone want to join an active travel group? And they were like, what the hell's active travel? They were like, this is and I then have to adopt councillor mode, and I hate that because this is my street, these are my neighbours, this is my street in St George. So, I just mean walking and cycling. And you just think that actually we have just got a tremendous amount of work around language, around actually not, firstly being wrong, the potential for the local authority and our partners to be incorrect about the way a response should be held is really, really important. So kind of flipping what we know now on its head and starting again from the communities inwards, I think is a really fundamental part of my time in the Cabinet. It's something I take very seriously. I know, I've still got a dad up in Salford who just sums up his dietary requirements as I don't like veg. He just eats meat and potatoes, basically. I love him. I hope he's watching this, Dad. But, we are starting from millions and millions of people in this country that don't have time to worry about climate change, right? My family included. And so coming here and doing this, it just, it's been quite an experience, as you can see by the fact I'm crying, which is a bit embarrassing, but never mind. Thank you so much. And I'm on a bit of a mission at the moment with Amy to sort of actually try and understand how we do this so every community benefits. And just on the wind turbine, I think there's a question over there. So I was previously the Cabinet member for planning, and it was one of my proudest moments was that we changed planning policy for the citizens of Lawrence Weston in order to get that application approved through the planning process. And we're also agreeing a sleeving agreement where we will actually buy that energy back as a local authority. So you can really see how one community, what did you call yourselves? A bunch of ruffians? Is that something like that? We'll be powering parts of our city council with that. And there was just one sec. There was also another question from your transition bloke. About kind of what can communities do. I think I said it in the earlier session, but there's actually a huge number of people in the city who have got relative affluence, so they also do actually want to help. And so one of the things that it's called Sonnet, you can Google it and look it up, we're currently consulting on how do we actually start a green municipal bond in the city so we can capture some of that wealth. People want to help, and actually our role as local authority is really to facilitate that support. And then we can use that money to actually decarbonise our community buildings, which in my opinion is one of the biggest potential kind of defenders against gentrification, is community ownership and community assets. And so that's another piece of work that I'm currently doing. So hopefully that gives you some sort of an answer on that front. Thank you so much, Amy. And sorry for crying, because that's really lame. Thank you.
Definitely don't think you should be apologising, Nicola, in terms of, you know, climate change and inequality. Yeah, it's something we should all be weeping about, and then turning that into collective, bold action for a just transition. But thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here and sharing some of those thoughts. And we look forward to working together with you to work towards Bristol's 2030 net zero target. So I'm very conscious of the fact that we need to wrap up because there's another event happening that, in this space in just a few minutes. And some of you might be staying on for that. So I've just been asked to say, please do check out the Festival of Future City website for other events that are happening. This event has been filmed and will be available to watch again if you've got friends or colleagues who weren't able to be here today. It's been great. I hope you've got some inspiration. I hope you've gone away with some ideas. Please, you know, that in terms of all of us, all of the organisations represented, please do feel free to come and talk to us. This is a collective endeavour in the city, and we do very much want some of the learning that we've had the privilege to gain because of the funding from the lottery, to be able to share that and help support other community organisations in the city to develop this work as well. So a massive thank you to all of our speakers, our artists and our community organisations, to Dee and to Emma who weren't able to be here this afternoon in person, and to all of you, the audience. Thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you again. Oh, Donna, yes?
I just want to say on behalf of everyone, thanks to Amy from Bristol Green Capital, who's been project managing this for the last year, entirely by Zoom. This is actually the first time we've all met. So we've not actually met each other.
Thanks, Donna. And what a pleasure and a privilege it is to meet you bunch of ruffians in 3D. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you very much.